Welcome to the Afterglow podcast, a space to practice Yoga Nidra informed by the ideas of Carl Jung and internal family systems. Each week we will work on a different life theme, giving us the opportunity to discover vast inner landscapes, sitting with all that life has to offer as we explore who we are. May the afterglow be as bright as the journey is deep. Hi, today I will be continuing on the theme of inner child work, focusing on recovering the inner child. This is from a moment or a time period in your past. I'll explain more on what this looks like in this part 1 of recovering the inner child. This practice is more advanced, and I do recommend listening to episode 4, Meeting the Inner Child, parts 1 and 2, before doing this practice discussed today. This is a wonderful and very rewarding type of work, and I encourage anyone who is curious to find their way into inner child work to follow along with this Yoga Nidra. Okay, let's dive in. In episode 4, I spoke a lot about the importance of inner child work, and I explained that there are as many inner children as there are experiences that you have had. So I suggest be loose with the term and just accept what the unconscious mind offers. What I mean is, either you're working with an inner child who went through a complex experience that lasted several months or even years, or you are working with a version of you that had a very specific experience and that you remember it as a closed event. These experiences don't have to be trauma with a capital T to be relevant. Try not to focus on the language, because we can get caught up in how we perceive ourselves. It may be that you overclassify events as traumas, or that you feel by not classifying something as a trauma, it is less of a burden. But I'm explicitly saying, forget the language and your fixed position on things. The more abstract you are willing to be, the more distinction you will find in what your unconscious mind delivers. Equally, the inner child doesn't have to be a child. If you have felt alone or humiliated or afraid or abused or taken advantage of, misunderstood at any point in your adult life, you can also recover them. What do I mean when I talk about recovering the inner child? Well, if we have a bad memory, a moment in our past that gives us a painful feeling of any kind, we can go and find that version of ourselves and comfort them and bring them back with us. Those painful memories have less of a hold on us when we do this. I kind of think about it like this. For all of the painful memories that we have, it's like that version of us is stuck in that memory. They live in that moment on repeat. And whenever we think about that time, that version of ourselves is still there, trapped in that experience alone. And by doing this type of work, we are bringing them back with us. We are no longer leaving them alone in this repetitive space, in this either specific moment or over a series of events that amount to a more complex trauma or a more complex scenario that we associate with a particular version of ourselves. Those painful memories will have less of a hold on us when we are able to recover these past versions of ourselves. Often they are children, so it still is relevant to talk about this as inner child work. But again, I'm not so particular about the age. It could be if you're in your 40s and you have a memory of being 38 that still gives you pain when you think about it, you can go and recover that 38-year-old version of yourself. We are no longer leaving that part of ourselves in that memory. By bringing them back into ourselves, integrating them into the larger system, It can help us reduce unconscious, repetitive behavioral patterns, unhelpful belief systems, and be more free of the weight of a moment that can sometimes feel lost in time. I want to explain just a little to give you a sense of how internal family systems pictures the inner landscape. IFS sees that every feeling, every behavior, every side to us is a part, P-A-R-T. These parts have different roles. Some of these parts are exiled, and we are not fully conscious of them. This is essentially what Jung sees as the shadow. IFS explains that other parts of us try and protect these exiled parts, often through behaviors like overspending, shutting down, people-pleasing, numbing ourselves, partying too much. These parts of us think they are performing a good service to the exiled part, and that there was a time in our past when it was probably necessary because our system wasn't fully equipped to deal with a stressful experience. And the solution was probably quite elegant at the time. But now it is in the unconscious, coming through as compulsive behaviors. Compulsive people-pleasing, compulsive lying, compulsive numbing out, compulsive negative thinking. IFS helps negotiate with these parts to give us access to the exiled part. And we bring that exiled part back into the fold. Here is a real example of how this can look in Yoga Nidra and in IFS. I'm going to change the name of this person and I'm going to call them Sarah. Sarah was struggling with a very bad depressive episode, and it was very debilitating. After spending days lying in the dark in bed, she started seeking answers within herself. And she did a version of Yoga Nidra and asked a question into her own mind. The image of a 14-year-old version of herself appeared as a way of response to her question. She knew that this was a very traumatic time in her life, being 14, and she spoke to this version of herself for a while, and she saw how alone and afraid the 14-year-old was. She comforted the inner child, and in the process she was crying pretty much the whole way through, and over the course of the conversation she could feel her depression beginning to melt away, and she allowed the sadness to come forward. She asked the 14-year-old version of herself if she would like to come back with her and be with her always. The 14-year-old said yes. This whole process, Sarah estimates, was about an hour. She can't say for sure, but she said it was about an hour of discussing with her 14-year-old self what life was like, how she felt, remembering different things that were happening at that time, what the circumstances were. She repeatedly gave comfort to the 14-year-old within her as they were able to go through all of these different events, and Sarah was able to remember a lot of these things in more detail, but more specifically she was able to see just how much of an impact it had on 14-year-old her. Being in that moment with her 20-something-year-old worldview gave her a completely different understanding of the events that were taking place. Not that the events themselves were different, but rather that she was able to grasp in a much more significant way how the events were impacting her, and how much 14-year-old Sarah was having to sort of defend against. And in that process, Sarah was able to really grieve, allow the sadness to come out. She was also crying for relief. She said that being able to connect with this 14-year-old version of herself was one of the most profound experiences she had ever had in doing inner work. And the relief that she felt for being connected, for being able to be there to comfort and to secure that version of herself, she said was something that she could never have imagined before it happened, and yet it was able to entirely transform her perception of who she was and how she was formed, and all the different parts of her that were formed, making up the whole version of herself. And she saw just how abandoned that 14-year-old version of herself had been. And so asking her to come back and integrate was the easiest, most, I think she said it was the easiest offering she had ever made to anyone. And after that, Sarah imagined that she was cuddling in bed with her 14-year-old self, and she read a book out loud with this sense of her 14-year-old self being in her arm, lying with her head on her chest, comforted by the warmth, by the connection, the feeling of awareness of her existence, the 14-year-old's existence, and aliveness. Sarah continued to cry, and she read on, relieved for the reconnection and the release from the depression. A few weeks later, Sarah was doing IFS, and she was working on her compulsive generosity. She had always had a problem with paying for things for other people, paying for group lunches or buying excessively nice gifts, and she was struggling financially, and she didn't have to buy anyone lunch, but yet she couldn't help herself. Often she would say to herself before going to a lunch that she mustn't pay and she must sort of restrain herself. But when it was nearing the time that the bill was coming, something would come over her and she would just convince herself that it was the right thing to do. Through a process of IFS, she was able to understand that the compulsive behavior was a defense. It was a part of her that was trying to manage and control her environment, was trying to maintain a sense of composure and order that was not authentic, but was a way for her to tackle social connection and also avoid being truly vulnerable even with some of her closest friends. And the more that her and the IFS therapist unpacked the experiences within the IFS, the more they discovered that it stemmed from her experiences at 14. And soon enough, she was in the IFS experience and she was talking to her 14-year-old self again. And she saw the poverty and the shame and the instability that the 14-year-old self was having to put up with. She saw how alone and friendless 14-year-old Sarah was, and how afraid she was about her future opportunities and what life could be like going forward. The IFS therapist and her discussed belief systems that were formed in that time, belief systems that were still in operation in Sarah in the present day and were coming through as compulsive behavior, as negative behavioral patterns or negative thinking. And she was able to reconnect again with that 14-year-old self. It was less emotional. She said that because she had made that connection a few weeks beforehand on her own, it didn't have quite the same emotional impact during the IFS therapy. So in the span of just a few weeks, Sarah was able to engage with the very same part of herself in two very different ways. One was through Yoga Nidra, and it was all feeling, all connection, all heart. And the other one was IFS, and it was focusing a lot more on connecting the behavioral dots, following the threads, and finding a linear progression of cause and effect. The story is a really great anecdote, and it's because it shows the different ways in which we can use different types of internal work for healing. Some people are not so interested in the analytical side, trying to understand the specifics of the behavioral patterns, and other people are much more focused on those specifics, and they don't want to have the big cathartic emotional cry holding their 14-year-old selves and reading a book out loud. So it doesn't need to be mimicked. If IFS is available to you, as always, I heartily recommend it. Otherwise, using Yoga Nidra is also a very suitable way of working with these inner parts of ourselves. Often with IFS, we are encouraged to spend time with these exiled parts, and after they've been reintegrated, and this is a way to keep that sense of connection. Maybe this means climbing trees more often, and when we do climb these trees, we're consciously doing it with an awareness that it's with the younger version of ourselves that we have reintegrated, that they are being able to live the experience with you, that they have a sense of being seen. As I said, this anecdote doesn't need to be mimicked. It's not, Sarah's story is not a prescriptive one in terms of this is how we should all do it, but rather something to consider as a way to see how these things can connect or overlap or provide different angles to look at something. My work as a Yoga Nidra teacher and what I'm doing with Afterglow Yogic Sleep is to show you how easy it is to sit with yourself, using Yoga Nidra simply as an avenue inward. Yoga Nidra is one route. There are many. Meditation, journaling, art, solitude. There are many ways to explore this work, and inner child work is a very important type of inner work. It helps us apply much needed comfort to parts of ourselves still left in a harrowing memory. Now, let's talk about how we can do some of this work on our own and what it would look like working with our inner child in this way of recovering them. In part 2, when we are done with the steps that are always in every part 2 episode, there's always the same Yoga Nidra steps to get into that state of semi-wakefulness, semi-sleep. Once we're done with those steps, I will prompt you to go back to a memory, a place where you felt maybe scared, misunderstood, alone. Whatever the feeling is that you associate with that time. And I will encourage you to approach that version of you and hug them. Give them love and compassion, understanding. Share with them everything that they are feeling is valid. I will then prompt you to invite them to come back with you and remain with you always. No longer trapped alone in this sad memory. As you can imagine, this work can be emotionally stirring. It is sometimes more suitable to people to start with a less sad memory first. Some people want to dive straight into the saddest, darkest memory that they can think of. And the goal of this is to do this type of work routinely, collecting all these parts of yourself throughout your life and bringing them back with you, integrating them. So let's imagine a breakup that you went through a few years ago, a moment in time when things were fraught and upsetting, you can land your awareness in that time and hug yourself. Invite that version of you to come back with you, showing them that they are not alone, that older and wiser parts of you are with them in support and in compassion. When I do this work, I don't use the Yoga Nidra steps each time, and I think, anyone who does this type of work often enough, you get so used to being in this internal landscape that you can quite quickly close your eyes, take a few deep breaths, do abbreviated versions of the steps, and be in that space, and you can recover these parts of yourself. We can let go naturally of some of these steps as it gets easier and easier to get into that state of present awareness within oneself. So, for example, if I'm alone cooking and a sad memory approaches me, if I want, I can stop and close my eyes, and I can go to that part of myself and I can recover them. Or if I wanted to, I could wait until I have a moment of quiet time before going to bed. And when I collect these versions of myself, I say to all of the ones that I have already collected, come, let's go and get her. Let's let her know that she's not alone. I picture all of these recovered parts of me in the room or the space where we land in that sad memory. And we're all there in support of this one version of us. And we bring them back with us. So it really does create this feeling of unity, of wholeness. And sometimes people ask me if it can feel a little bit like we're sort of like split personality, or I think some people have maybe concerns around like a divided self, or a sense of like, I know that there's this common thing, especially with PRO, and I've had it as well, where people can feel like there's like another force within them, or like they could meet someone else in their mind. There's all sorts of creative and imaginative ways in which we like to pump fear into ourselves. I can say now that it definitely does not feel like that at all. It feels wonderful. It feels very wholesome and natural. It's incredibly calming. I mean, it might be emotionally stirring in the sense that, you might release some sadness, but it's that wonderful relief feeling that comes when you sort of that post-cry relief feeling. It's more like that, as opposed to, emotionally stirring in a sense of, bringing you into fear or anything like that. So it doesn't feel as though you are splitting yourself, or as though you have a divided self. It really, really does feel like you're more one. You are more yourself. You are more unified. And that's exactly what this process is doing. It's unifying. It's reintegrating these different parts of you. And ultimately, this is an experience or an experiment of the imagination. But that doesn't mean that it is not impactful or incredibly powerful in terms of altering how conscious and aware you are of what mechanisms within yourself are your driving forces, where the energy is coming from, where the energy is going, how you are making choices, how you are able to be most self-aware. And I should say, I never try and change them. This is really important. For example, and I'll tell a personal story now. there was a version of me at 15 who was really into angel cards. I'm not so new age now. I have no interest in angel cards, but that is something I strongly associate with me at 15. So when I reintegrated a version of me from 15, I was happy that she had her angel cards, and interacting with her, and having these other sort of reintegrated versions of me in this inner landscape, this sort of safe space, which I'll talk about in a second. Having everyone in the safe space, and there's often this time of sort of that I really encourage, where you kind of can play or interact, or you sort of just kind of let the inner children play with each other and be in this state of comfort. And anyway, 15-year-old version of me had her angel cards, and she was I sort of loosely imagined that she was sort of doing angel card readings for other versions of me. And the fact that now I don't care at all for angel cards is irrelevant. It's not I'm not trying to change that 15-year-old version of me. I want to watch her engage with other versions of me at 8, me at 20. And 15-year-old me comes with her angel cards, and she comes with her enthusiasm. That's where I was at 15. And there are versions of me that were really depressed, and I just let them be morose, and I give them hugs when I can sense that something that I'm feeling in my day-to-day, in my present life, is connected to a version of me. This is a common thing. If it's like a comment from a parent, or there's an authority figure that says something in a certain way, or sibling stuff, or anything, in time you learn to identify. Even without doing yoga nidra, people are able to identify all the time, oh, this is connected to me at 15 or me at 18 when I had that experience. And then you can go into yourself. You don't have to do the full steps of yoga nidra. You can just close your eyes, take a minute, and very quickly locate that version of yourself. Either reintegrate them if you haven't already, and then if you have, or when you have, you give them a hug, and it goes a long way to alleviating the present moment, the present suffering. These things are not necessarily new. I think that a lot of this type of work people do similar versions of. People develop coping mechanisms that are often kind of similar to this sort of self-soothing type of practice. This is just a concrete way of saying, here is a way to self-soothe, here's a way to gather different parts of yourself. And having done this systematically for a long period of time, I can say it really works. And so, yeah, don't try and change them. If they want to be depressed, if they're angry, they're there, and they're within you now, and you're able to recognize it and see it, and comfort it. I promise you, it's significantly better being able to see it and know that it's there, as opposed to not looking at it and pretending it's not there. If you feel like you would do better to do this work with the guidance of a therapist, wholeheartedly encourage that. The work with Yoga Nidra is gentle and it should be comforting, but if you're feeling overwhelmed by the task of recovering an inner child, please seek additional support, of course. After reconnecting or reintegrating this recovered version of you, I really recommend doing a practice that symbolizes this reconnection. So let's say you do the practice and you reconnect with a version of you that's 8 years old. Later that day or that weekend, whenever, hopefully, within a couple of days at least, or even straight away, taking time to listen to music that you loved when you were 8, or playing a Nintendo game that you liked to play when you were 8, or drawing, or calling up a friend that you were really close to at 8, or playing a ball game that you loved, or looking through toys from that time. Any of these practices that help to symbolize this reconnection, help you to comfort that part of you with something fun and familiar and soothing. I cannot recommend it enough. It's really great. And anytime you want to connect with that version of yourself, it really helps to sort of lay the groundwork. And you may even find that you are sort of semi-consciously drawn to things from that time. So maybe it's like reading a book that you associate with that specific age. And it gives a conscious expansion to this reunion through this type of symbolic engagement. Right, so preparation for part 2, which is the Yoga Nidra part, to this part 1, which is providing context. Try and think of a moment in time where you would like to go to recover a past version of yourself. Choosing one that you think will be manageable. You don't have to go, as I said already, you don't have to go straight for the heaviest, darkest memory. You can start off with something small or medium. That's perfectly okay, and I guarantee you it gets much easier and becomes really fun, and it's overall a very positive experience. But I also understand that it can feel very daunting, especially at the beginning. So you've picked your part that you want to recover, and notice what emotions come up. Is there a sort of overarching emotion? Is it injustice? Is it shame or fear? Just making a mental note of the emotion that is strongly attached to that memory. And try and remember the space that you were in, or the people that were there. If it's a version of you over a longer period of time, like an age, like it's the general age of say 16, then just thinking of different places that you would often be in, or the types of friends that you had at the time, things like that. Next, I encourage you, if you haven't already, I would encourage that you listen to episode 1 or episode 7, both of which provide a framework for you to create a base camp of sorts. It's a safe landing space within yourself, a place that is just for you, contained. It's a contained inner place that you can return to when you're doing this type of inner work. When you recover different parts of yourself, that's a place for you to bring them back to. I mean, they are with you anyway, but it's nice to visually imagine that they are now in this inner space that only you can be in. It's just your inner world. You're not inviting imagined versions of your friends or your partner or your children or anything like that into this space. It's just for you, and that includes different versions of you. The only exception is like a higher self, or a higher being or deity, however you like to imagine a sort of numinous energy, whether it's your concept of God, whether it's the idea of Mother Nature, whether you have a specific guru or teacher that you follow as part of a spiritual practice. That's all suitable. That's great. Having that. If you don't, I really recommend the concept of Mother Nature. Some people like to use the cosmos, the sort of the whole idea of space and stars and the expansiveness of time and everything, planets, all that is contained within the idea of the cosmos. So that's something that I discuss more in episode 1. So if you haven't listened to episode 1, I do recommend. It will help. Otherwise, just be comfortable to sort of see what your unconscious mind delivers in the moment, in the Yoga Nidra. This space is a really useful space, and I do recommend gaining a sense of familiarity with it overall. To give you an idea of what the space could look like, it could be a walled garden, it could be a mountaintop or a beach, it could be a tree house, it could be a alien planet. As long as there's no one else there but you and you, it's fine. Whatever feels good. It can be a cloud. You can literally be inside a cloud. You can be inside a mirror ball, a disco mirror ball, or inside a, what are they called? Like inside a tree. There's a sort of hollowed out trees. I'm thinking of the gummy bears. They sort of lived within a tree under the ground. It could be anything that your mind sees as a comforting, nourishing space to be in. Right, so if you would like to do a more advanced version of this practice, where you start finding correlating compulsive behaviors with these versions of you, then you do have the opportunity. If you want to, you can reach out and work with me one-to-one. The information is all on my website, alacapella.co.uk. The Yoga Nidra for the podcast, of course, I'm trying to make things as accessible and usable for as many people as possible. That is inevitably not going to be able to support you with any sort of more tailored one-to-one support where we try and connect compulsive behaviors, or in Jungian language we would say neuroses, with your experiences in Yoga Nidra. So if you would like to do something like that, it is a bit more advanced, feel free to reach out to me. Otherwise, simply just have this mental image of the memory that you'd like to return to, and I'll see you for part 2. Enjoy. Thank you for joining us for this weekly companion episode. It really does add to the experience that you will have in Yoga Nidra. The Yoga Nidra will be uploaded in a few days, giving you time to reflect on the questions that I've asked you. Please subscribe to receive notifications for this new Yoga Nidra episode, as well as for future ones. Thank you for adding your light and kindness to the world, and for doing this important inner work. May the afterglow be as bright as the journey is deep. See you soon.